Happy October, everyone. Graveyard here. I just want to give everyone a quick, deeper dive into the horror that was Marvel Zombies, the four-part season 1 that came out last week. This won't be a full Easter egg recap or breakdown. Other channels have done those comprehensive lists for us, so check them out in the links below. But let's get into this. I want to give my insight into the biggest differences between the comics and the show that we possibly can, and the deeper horror meanings that exist throughout the show. Spoilers ahead for anyone that hasn't seen it yet. Make sure to stop this video, go watch it now, watch other breakdowns, and come back to this, back into it. So, in episode 1, a lot of people say that the title is very reminiscent of Evil Dead. It's not quite so much, but it's more of an Evil Dead 2, which is, a black background, white titles, letters that we're able to see on the background. Now, this is, in my opinion, a callback to the first zombie movie, White Zombie, and the creepy blaring sound. The whispers are kind of there of the James Wan category of Conjuring and Insidious. Now, further in the movie, we have a jet crashing with a zombie. We don't know who the zombie is, but to me, this is very reminiscent of George Romero's 1973, The Crazies, where we have a plague that is caused by a jet crashing. To me, that's an homage because they are zombies in a way. Now, the device that is inside this unknown zombie is kind of a plot point. It is the cure to stop the zombie plague, which is very reminiscent of most zombie movies where there's one person that has special blood, such as Girls with All the Gifts, or Zombieland, or anything else like that. Even Resident Evil with the solution to the T-virus. But to me, this is kind of like the kickoff that we see in I Am Legend. Now, when Riri, Kate, and Kamala walk through the Desert City, once again very typical in zombie movies, usually seen in 20 Days Later, I Am Legend, Last of Us, but there's predate stuff to those movies. We have Night of the Comet, where it's LA that we see is taken down by zombies and mutations, stuff like that. But to me, the quintessential plot point that this is taken from is Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price. Now, we see Hawkeye sniping from a window, and that's kind of like Dawn of the Dead, where you have a shooter on top shooting the zombies. But this is kind of the reverse, where we have zombie Clint Barton shooting at the troop that we have here. Now, the road trip through the desert, reference to Mad Max, but also Resident Evil, and there's always wastelands of deserts. We see that in Army of Dead as well, but to me, Dawn of the Dead is a quintessential piece of that and Resident Evil. Now, back to the cure being brought to military base. 28 days later, Day of the Dead, once again, I Am Legend. We always have the military being the police state that is protecting the last sanctity of humanity. We get that, but the rest of the episodes in this. Now, the cast characters sacrifice themselves as the movie progressed. Huge trope of every zombie movie that exists. Now, in my head, the whispers of Wanda controlling the Horde is a callback to Black Talon controlling Simon Garth, the first Marvel zombie that exists. And we do see him in Marvel Zombies run number, I believe, 4. And that is a voodoo zombie versus a plague zombie, which is the original idea of a zombie being come from voodoo. Now, with Wanda controlling the hive minds of the zombies, to me is very similar to Ultron versus the Marvel Zombies, which is a run in the Marvel Zombies comic book. And I kind of see that as that similarity, and he's using it there. Now, of course, the endless horde attacking everyone, that's quintessential of World War Z, and of course, Resident Evil movies, which have the biggest, really zombie attack scenes that we have so far. Now, the piece that I see in this episode 1 that isn't a necessarily zombie-esque callback, but is when the spear goes through Melina and goes through the door in the backside. That's typical of a slasher. We have people like Michael Myers, who's able to shove a gun through someone and through a door, but really Jason Voorhees, he's able to stab his machete through really anything that we see. And to me, that's a classic slasher callback. Now, on to episode 2. Now, we have giant grasshoppers that are affected by the pin particles, but them crawling the building, to me, is a good reference to the beginning of the end. The Peter Graves movie about mutated grasshoppers, and they really are just grasshoppers on top of a postcard of the Empire State Building. It's a good callback to that. We have the giant seagull as well. To me, it's the Claw, another B movies from the 50s and 60s. Now, the zombies falling from the building, very, very World War Z, but also, a different type of zombie of The Happening, where trees are causing people to jump off the building in a construction site. Now, Katie grabbing the pipe in San Francisco is kind of, to me, a callback to Silent Hill, where generally you have a piece of wood, but your first stable weapon is a pipe. And that's kind of the go-to for any first zombie game is a pipe. Now, Shang-Chi's dad and the Ten Rings coming in helicopters, while it is very apocalypse now, that also happens with helicopters in Resident Evil by, Paul W.S. Anderson. Now, Shang-Chi getting bit on the hand, on the right hand specifically, to me, it's very Ash from Evil Dead, where he, instead of chopping off his hand, he gets a ring to stop it, the infection. So just a different way of doing the same thing. Once again, the raft being the last city of humanity, very Resident Evil, Zombieland, and Land of the Dead, where we have the last sanctity of humanity. Sitting at sea, once again, Resident Evil, with it even being corrupt, run by a Baron or the military, which is 20 Days Later, Last of Us, and all that jazz. Now, Zombie Namor. People always debated whether zombies could survive underwater. We do see that in Land of the Dead, where the zombie horde goes to the last city and goes underwater and is able to survive. So we have that. Now, all the whispers that we get in the opening credits and throughout episode 2, Wanda's whispers to me are not much different than when Ash from Evil Dead is being tormented by the Deadites. It's very reminiscent of that. Now, so that's all there, but the last scene in episode 2 that I think most people don't give enough horror credit to is when Yelena is running through the hall and hands are coming out of the wall. That is 100% Day of the Dead, George Romero's original from the 80s. Now, on to episode 3. Zombie Thanos learning to use the gauntlet and, all the Infinity Stones. We do see zombies learning after some period of time in George Romero's Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead, where they start going back to their normal everyday lives. Now, of course, the hands coming out of the ground is a great reference to Evil Dead, which in itself was homage to the ending dream sequence of Carrie. Now, I bring this up because in the Marvel Zombies comics, Ash kind of is responsible in a way for the Marvel Zombies, and we have Ash, Army Darkness versus Marvel Zombies, where he actually goes into the planet or Earth Z as infected, and he realizes that these zombies are vastly different from ones that are the Deadites from the Necronomicon, but I have to throw it out there because it is a great homage to it. Now, I think Zombie Wanda in episode 3 looks a lot like, especially with her crown, the Queen Zombie from Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. Now, when as a troop is kind of getting through everything, we see Jimmy being attacked in the raft. He is torn apart. Very, very similar to David in Shaun of the Dead at the bar scene. Now, the last piece here in episode 3 is we have the Nova Corps, who's acting as the military in most zombie movies, having a quarantine and stopping and shooting anyone that comes out of the quarantine zone. This is really just like the Crazies 28 weeks later, where we have all of England isolated by the military, and eventually people start going into it. Now, on to episode 4, there's only really one piece that I have not seen people talk about, and it's kind of the last stand. There's always a last stand in majority of zombie movies. And to me, this is very reminiscent of Alice taking the survivors on ships against Umbrella in the Resident Evil franchise as well. So that is all the horror pieces that I think I found that other people didn't really talk about, didn't mention, or didn't dive deeper into it. But like I said, check out the other videos that are out there for Easter eggs. They do great work for everything else. Now, there is something I want to talk about that is, to me, big differences, obviously, between the comics and the TV show, and there are some similarities in there. So basically, in the Marvel Zombies comics, superheroes are the main zombies because the zombie plague really wants superheroes. It thrives within them. Now, obviously, in the comics, they can retain all their memories and can talk. And they eventually go into the cosmos and eat everything after eating Silver Surfer and Galactus and gain all the cosmic powers. This lets them do it. And we have 40-ish years that pass in the comics as they go back. Now, in the show Marvel Zombies, a shot to the head tends to kill a zombie, which is very George Romero-esque zombie that we have it. But in the comics, we see Colonel America, his head kind of sliced in half in the top part, and his brains are dripping out, but he's still able to function. Now, to me, this is more a Return of the Living Dead zombie where it doesn't matter. You can chop them all up. They still kind of stay alive. There's not really a way other than complete annihilation to kill them, which is also kind of very Dead Alive, which I call the New Zealand Evil Dead. Now, in the original comics, there's multiple ways that the zombie virus comes to be. Some say it's Fantastic Four, some say it's a loop, some say it's Evil Dead and Necronomicon, but it's all kind of the same thing. And the red band that just came out last week shows the Fantastic Four being the cause. Now, obviously, in the TV show, it is, the quantum realm that Janet brings back and kind of happens where, and really in the comics, it spreads rapidly because of Quicksilver being infected and going everywhere. Now, some pieces that are similar in the comics to the TV show, we have the What If episode, Marvel, What If, Zombies. We have T'Challa being eaten piece by piece, cut off by Vision to feed Wanda to help appease her. Now, in the original comics, Hank Pym was doing this to T'Challa to keep his hunger at bay so he can have a clear head. He was doing this to find a cure. And that's what's really interesting with this is that the superheroes in the comics eventually turn on each other and trying to save the last piece of humanity that was hiding in Wakanda, that was hiding in Asteroid M. And they come against each other and they are trying to find a cure. So being a zombie doesn't mean you're necessarily evil. You just have this uncontrollable hunger that you can't get rid of. And kind of the last piece that I'm able to see that's similar is we have Scott Lang just ahead in an enclosure, obviously with the cloak from Doctor Strange flying around. Now, to me, this is Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, in the comics because her head gets decapitated and she turns and tries to help everyone. So she is put for the safety of others on Asteroid M and Wakanda in a very similar head dome, so she can't bite anyone. And she's eventually given robotic suits because we're able to do that. And that's all created by Forge. And, we have in the Marvel Comics, we have a couple of teams that are able to actually stop or fight the Marvel Zombies. We have all the mechanical-based superheroes. So we have Vision, we have Wonder Man, and we have Hellstorm, and we have Midnight Suns that are generally prone to not be infected by this. But we do see an alternate Michael Morbius who is able to become a zombie. Now, that kind of begs the question that we didn't really answer is what happened if Blade would be bit? Can you become a zombie vampire? It's yes and no. It's never fully explained in the comics. But, that kind of goes into the idea of Last Man on Earth and I Am Legend, where they are zombie vampires. So I kind of wish the show would have taken a little bit more direction and kind of do a what if these other superheroes are bitten. I would love to have seen what Blade would have become if he was bitten by a zombie. Now, if you notice anything else that I have missed or disagree, let us know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you